Hey everyone, my name's Peyton, and today is the second episode of our SideLine Sports podcast. Here we talk about all things professional sports, but mainly NFL, NBA, and college football and basketball. Today we're going to do a little bit of an NFL preview and going over my top teams in the league and my playoff predictions. Before we get into talking about my playoff predictions, I want to start off today by going over the teams that I have at the bottom of the league and that really have no chance to make the playoffs. I have 9 teams, and that's going to be the Commanders, Falcons, Bears, Rams, Titans, Buccaneers, Colts, Texans, and Cardinals. These are all teams that this year will be sort of a rebuilding year, or in the case of like the Rams and the Bears, who have made improvements, they're just in too competitive of divisions to have any chance to make the playoffs. Now we're going to talk about what teams I believe actually have a chance to make the playoffs, starting with the teams that are pretty obvious that most people expect to make the playoffs. In the AFC, I have the Chiefs, Bills, Bengals, and Jaguars. The Chiefs, Bills, and Bengals have been at the top of the AFC for the last few years, and I don't expect that to change. At the bare minimum, they'll make the wild card, and there's really no chance that any of these teams miss the playoffs unless there's a huge injury. Then I also have the Jaguars and the obvious teams to make the playoffs in the AFC because the AFC South is such a weak division that the Jags should be able to dominate it and go 6-0 or 5-1 in their division, which will really help their record and pretty much guarantee them the win in that division and a playoff spot. Now in the NFC, I have 3 teams in this division for teams that should easily make the playoffs. Those teams are the Eagles, 49ers, and Cowboys. Now, I only have 3 teams and 2 of them coming from the same division in the NFC due to the fact that the NFC has slightly more competitive divisions, meaning that it's hard to determine what teams will easily make the playoffs. The Eagles and 49ers were the 1 and 2 seed last year, and I don't expect anything to change. And I also think the Cowboys are the 3rd best team in this division, but since they're behind the Eagles, they won't win the division, but they'll definitely make the wild card. Now to head into the teams that are playoff likely and playoff hopeful. In the AFC, I have the Chargers, Dolphins, Jets, and Ravens. Starting with the Chargers, I think they're one of the more well-built and well-balanced teams, and they also have Justin Herbert. They'll be a competitive team in the AFC, and the only team they'll struggle with in their division is the Chiefs. Now moving to the Dolphins and Jets. They are a part of the most competitive division in the AFC because they have to play against the Bills and the Patriots and each other. Besides this, they both have good rosters and both have made improvements to get better this year, the Jets mainly making the trade for Aaron Rodgers to give their offense a big boost in addition to their already strong defense, and the Dolphins have one of the best wide receiver corps in the NFL to go along with a pretty strong defense, so both of these teams are hoping to make the playoffs this year. And the last team in the playoff hopeful for the AFC are the Ravens. They kept Lamar around, so they want to remain competitive and they don't want to miss the playoffs. And they have a decent enough roster where they should have a chance to make the playoffs this year. Now for the likely and playoff hopeful teams in the NFC, I have the Lions, Vikings, Saints, Seahawks, and Giants. I have more teams in this division for the NFC because, as I said earlier, I believe the NFC is more competitive. Starting with the Lions and Vikings, I believe both teams are easily able to make the playoffs, but it's just a matter of who's going to be first in the division and who's going to be second. I personally believe that the Lions will win this division, but you never know with the Lions, as I am a Lions fan, and over the years, there's been times where we expect them to do good, and they do terrible, and we expect them to do terrible, and they do good. So you never really know with them, so the Vikings will be right there if the Lions happen to take a step back, but I think both teams will make the playoffs. Then moving on to the Saints. The Saints are in the weakest division in the NFC, and there's not much competition for them. They do have the Panthers there, which could cause a little bit of a struggle, but it shouldn't be too much of a deal, and I think the Saints will be able to get over it pretty easily. Then the last 2 teams in this division for the NFC are the Seahawks and Giants. These are both teams that made the playoffs last year and tried to make moves to continually make their teams better. The Giants have brought in Darren Waller to be the biggest offensive weapon for Daniel Jones, and the Seahawks drafted really well and have one of the best wide receiver cores in the NFL. Now, before I go into my actual seeding and playoff bracket predictions, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about some sleeper playoff teams that I have in both conferences. Starting with the AFC, my two sleepers are the Browns and the Steelers. The Browns have a well-built offense and defense and also have Deshaun Watson, who could lead the Browns to the playoffs if he plays like his old self. The Browns also have star-studded players such as Nick Chubb and Myles Garrett, who are some of the best at their positions and could help carry the offense and defense. The Steelers also are decently built, where they're not bad at one thing, but they're also not amazing at anything. The biggest reason I have to put them in the sleeper playoff team section, though, is they have debatably the best head coach in the NFL with Mike Tomlin, who has never had a losing season, so they're always right there in the playoff conversation. In the NFC, my two sleeper teams are going to be the Panthers and the Packers. The Panthers are the only other competent team in the division with the Saints, so if they play good and the Saints don't really play to their potential, the Panthers would be right there to win the division and come up and have that guaranteed playoff spot. I also have the Packers as a sleeper because even though they did lose Aaron Rodgers, they still have some of the makings of a possible playoff team, but the chance of them making the playoffs would really come down to the young player's performance and how well Jordan Love could do as the starter. Now for this next segment of our episode today, we're going to go over my actual seeding predictions in each conference. If you don't understand how NFL seeding and playoff spots work, here's a quick little overview. If you win your division of 4 teams in your conference, you automatically be put in the 1 through 4 seed based on the records between the 4 divisional winners. Then after that, the 3 teams with the next best records will be given the 5 through 7 seed and will be the final playoff teams. So starting in the AFC, my 1 through 4 seed in order is going the Bengals, Chiefs, Jaguars, and Bills. I do have the Bengals becoming the 1 seed this year over the Chiefs due to the fact that I believe they have a slightly easier schedule and they have young players that are continuing to improve year over year, and their roster is a little bit more complete than the Chiefs. The Chiefs are coming in at number 2. They have the best offensive duo in the league with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, along with one of the best QBs and athletes of our generation, Patrick Mahomes, who has led a strong offense with Andy Reid, who will always keep them at the top of the AFC. Next, I have the Jaguars over the Bills at the 3 seed, solely due to the fact that Jaguars have the easiest division in the AFC and will have a likely better record due to the fact. And then the Bills will be the 4 seed, even though I believe they're a better team than the Jaguars. They just have a harder schedule than them, so they end up at the 4 seed. Now for my 5 through 7 seed, I have the Chargers, Ravens, and Jets in the AFC, with the Dolphins missing the playoffs at the 8 spot. The Chargers are one of the best teams in the division and better than the Jaguars, but since they have the Chiefs in their conference, they're not going to win their division, but they'll be right there at 5 and have a good wild card matchup against the Bills first round. Next, I have the Ravens. Now, the Ravens, I believe, are worse than the Jets and Dolphins, but as we know in the NFL, strength of schedule is a big thing, and the Ravens have an easier schedule playing in a less competitive conference than the Jets and Dolphins, meaning that they'll get that 6 seed over both of them. Then for the 7 seed, I do really believe it's a toss-up between the Jets and the Dolphins, but I believe that the Jets outmatch the Dolphins slightly, solely due to the fact that Aaron Rodgers has more experience than Tua, and in the big games, the Jets will perform better than the Dolphins. Now for my NFC seedings, my division winners in order from 1 to 4 for the seeding is going to be the Eagles, 49ers, Lions, and Saints. I have the Eagles to repeat as the NFC's 1 seed this year because I believe they have the best built roster in the NFL, and besides their division, they have a fairly decent, easy schedule. Right after them, also repeating in the 2 seed, I have the 49ers. They play in a slightly weaker division in the NFC West, and they also have a strong defense to go with offensive superstars such as George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, and Deebo Samuel. In the 3 seed, I have the Lions winning the NFC North over the Vikings, as I said earlier. I believe the Lions are set up for a big year this year. Jared Goff played great last year, and they have young pieces like Amon-Ra and Penei Sewell to keep the offense going, and they drafted well and made many big changes to their secondary to help improve their defense that was so lackluster last season and what really held them back from making the playoffs in 2023. Now, for the last team in the 1 through 4 seed, I have the Saints. This is just because the NFC South is so weak. I believe they're the best team, and so one team from that division has to make the playoffs, so I have the Saints. Now, for my 5 through 7, I have the Cowboys, Vikings, and Seahawks, with the Giants coming in at 8, right behind the Seahawks. As I said earlier, I believe the Cowboys are one of the best teams in the NFC, but only one team from each division can be a 1 through 4 seed. So, similar to the Chargers, the Cowboys will come in right at 5. After them, I have the Vikings at 6. Like I said, them and the Lions could battle for the NFC North title, but the Vikings still have a good enough team with Justin Jefferson and their decent defense that they'll make the playoffs and come in at 6. I have the Seahawks at 7. They made the playoffs last year. They have young players that are developing. They drafted well. And Geno Smith, if he can repeat what he did last year, the Seahawks should definitely be right there for the playoffs. I have the Giants right there missing the playoffs, and this is mostly due to the fact they have to play the Eagles and the Cowboys both twice this year, where they could very likely go 1-3, which would hurt their record and overall chances of making the playoffs this year. Now for my last segment in today's episode, we're going to be going over my playoff predictions with my given seeds. So the Bengals and Eagles get a first-round bye due to them being the 1 seeds in each of their conferences. Then for the first-round matchups in the AFC, it's Bills-Chargers, Jags-Ravens, and Chiefs-Jets. I think the Jags easily beat the Ravens here, and the Chiefs and Jets could be competitive, a nice little battle between Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, but I think the Chiefs will come out on top on that one. The closest game on this first round for the AFC is definitely Bills-Chargers. I feel like these teams are pretty equal on both sides of the ball, with the Chargers having a slight edge on the offensive side of the ball. So I am going to end up giving this a win to the Chargers. I think Herbert's going to have a big year, and this is going to be his first playoff win in his career. Now for the NFC first-round matchups, we have 49ers-Seahawks, Lions-Vikings, and Saints-Cowboys. Starting with Saints-Cowboys, I think this is the least close game in all of the playoffs, and that the Cowboys easily win this matchup as they are the far superior team. Next up for 49ers-Seahawks, I think the 49ers will come out on top. This is a division rivalry right here, so either side could win, but I do think the 49ers have the better overall roster and will win that game. And for the Lions-Vikings, like I said earlier, similar to 49ers-Seahawks, this is a division rivalry. Both teams could easily win this game, but I think the Lions would take it here. Now for the second round matchups, in the AFC, we have the Bengals-Chargers and Jags-Chiefs. And in the NFC, we have 49ers-Lions and Cowboys-Eagles. Starting in the AFC with Bengals-Chargers, I think this could be a close game. The Chargers do have a better defense, but I think the Bengals offense overpowers the Chargers defense, and the Bengals move on to the AFC Championship. For Jags-Chiefs, this is a repeat of last year, and similar to last year, I think the Chiefs will win. They have more playoff experience than the Jags and the better overall team, so they're going to move on. Now in the NFC for 49ers-Lions, I actually have the Lions upsetting the 49ers here. I think the Lions match up well against the 49ers, as their biggest weakness last year on defense was guarding the long ball and deep passes. The 49ers don't do that too often and rely on a lot of short plays. The Lions' defense is pretty good at guarding short plays, and they've made improvements this year that will make that even better. So because of that, I think the Lions will beat the 49ers here and move on. Now for Cowboys-Eagles, I could see this matchup going either way. They would have played each other 2 times already this season, but I do think the Eagles advance to the NFC Championship again. They have the best roster in the NFL, in my opinion, and I think they beat the Cowboys here in the playoffs when it matters most. Now for the conference championship, I have the Bengals and Chiefs in the AFC and the Lions and Eagles in the NFC. Starting with the Bengals and the Chiefs in the AFC, I think this is going to be a back-and-forth offensive game, very high scoring. I am going to give the edge to the Bengals this year, as I feel like their offense is more complete than the Chiefs. The Chiefs lost a lot of their wide receiving core and would have to rely heavily on Kelsey in this game, where the Bengals have the best wide receiver core in the NFL, and I feel like it would just overwhelm the Chiefs' defense, meaning the Bengals advance to the Super Bowl. Now in the NFC with Lions-Eagles, I think the Eagles will win this matchup, and the Lions could keep it close depending on if they play their best, but if the Lions don't play at their best, I feel like this is an easy win for the Eagles. But either way, I have the Eagles advancing to the Super Bowl. So with that, my Super Bowl prediction comes out to be the Bengals versus the Eagles. I think these teams match up fairly well on offense, with both of them having offensive powerhouses and strong wide receiver cores, but I think the Eagles really have the edge when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. They have a better pass rush and a pretty equal, if not slightly better secondary, and I think that's where they would overpower the Bengals. Both teams can score, so I believe this game would be about who can get the stops. I think the Eagles would get the stops down the line, meaning my predicted Super Bowl champions in 2024 is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's going to be it today for our episode on my little NFL preview and playoff predictions for this upcoming season. I hope you enjoyed. Our next episode is going to come out on Thursday this week, and it's going to be a little bit of a college football preview. Thanks again for listening today, and if you have any feedback, please leave it in the comments as it would be greatly appreciated. Make sure to tune in to the next episode Thursday, and have a good one.